Hey, welcome back to here at the Convention Center in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm Tanner Grace. This is Red Zone Rogue. He's distracting me quite a bit over here to the right as well. And we're going to be going into another round, a match here in round 8. Before we get into that just for a second, I wanted to talk about, we had about a minute before this match comes up. I want to talk about one of the pods in particular that I walked by out there and saw. I nicknamed this one the Pod of Death. This was Pod 3, so it's possible that 2 of the players from this can make their way to top 8s. But it included Tarek Patel, Raib Sagal, and Brennan Patrick.
That's a spicy pod.
I'm hoping at least 2 of those 3 players make it, because there was also some other really good solid players in there as well. And we saw a lot of really good players spread out. So I'm hoping that we get a massive top 8 here today.
Yeah, I think we'll see some very, very high level play leading up into the top 8 here.
In fact, so we're in round 8. These players are trying to make top 8. So let's go into the last game that we got from round 8 here. Start to move on to the next day.
Ooh, and here we have an Oldhim mirror match for the first time today.
All right, everybody get comfortable at home.
Yeah, really. Ooh, we see a spicy little majestic hammer there, one of DM Armada's favorites.
You can't see him, he's off camera right now, but he is fist pumping.
He is cheering. Another thing to note, Caleb only has 1 piece of equipment, where Paul's rocking a solid 3 pieces of equipment.
I think that's a plume that's in the glare area that we've talked about.
Yep, got a plume.
Are those the same?
Yep, plume. We have the coat of frost. And what
is that? A Cracker Jacks? I can't tell. Anyway.
I do think it is. Do think it is a good old Cracker Jacks. Oh, we have a huge block right off the bat. Well, and you know what? This is kind of like a fair thing to do, right? Paul's just like, you know what? I'm gonna block these cards. Gonna draw up at the end of turn.
Now I have some experience playing Oldhim in sealed and in draft, but in draft I have never actually played the mirror. Have you done this? Like, do you have any experience this matchup and have an idea of what these players should be looking to do?
I haven't personally played the Oldhim mirror, but I think it's very, very interesting, especially how they tuned their decks, whether or not they leaned more into Earth or leaned more into Ice. And I think that could heavily come into play, right? Because those cards not only affect obviously the cards that you're playing, but it also affects Oldhim's hero ability, right? So when you're doing your defensive reaction, whether it's an Earth card or an Ice card, it'll affect what it does. And here we have a Strength of Sequoia. So if he fuses this, he's going to be able to get a Seismic Surge token, and it looks like he is going to fuse it. So this is a card that's going to stick around. It's an aura. It's going to stick around, and next turn it's going to pop and pump up his first Guardian attack action. And this Seismic Surge aura is also going to pop at the start of his next turn and reduce the cost of his next Guardian attack action by 1.
Yeah, now this doesn't necessarily, I was about to say, we're probably going to see an attack from the weapon here from Paul, and we do. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he was going to make a big attack this turn, because that Strength of Sequoia is going to pump something next turn, and that Seismic token is going to sit around and make something cheaper for next turn. So you might see something like a Glacial Footsteps, or a Thump. Yeah, Thump would be a really good one here.
Thump is a fantastic one to play into this.
I would say I had a guy in my local area who he was the first one I saw really do this deck with Oldhim with a bunch of Thumps and a way to what were we all calling it? Pump the Thump.
Pump the Thump, exactly.
And he had 7 Thumps in his deck.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. So we have a full block here. We see him blocking with some pretty strong cards. It's going to be very interesting to see how he plays it up, right? Because he's rocking this sweet, majestic hammer, and at any point he's just like, I could swing in my hammer.
Oh, this is a Snow Under that's going to be fused. This is a big player. Very big attack with a really good on-hit for Frostbites.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that, especially if you're trying to set up for a big turn, you kind of don't want to get frostbitten.
And this is a really big spot that I think we don't talk about enough. So Caleb has to present a big attack this turn going into the Strength of Sequoia Seismic token as well, because you don't want to leave a bunch of cards hanging around in Paul's hand. But I will say this, all Paul really needs here is 1 3-pitch and a big attack.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of range that he can have as a really big turn.
He did keep 2 cards in hand. He does still have a card in Arsenal. And
exactly what we saw coming. This is it.
He's pumping that Thump. So Thump is going to get Dominate from the pump effect, and it's a beating. Like, it really is. And I love the name of this card, too. They perfectly named it. The card's called Thump, right?
Yeah, he's pumping that Thump.
It's so good. It's so good. So not only does it have this nice pump, but it also has Dominate. It's just going to make it really, really hard to defend. And Caleb is basically like, okay, do I need to use a defense reaction now? Because he can always use his defense reaction from Oldhim if he has Earth cards to prevent the damage here. The Ice activation isn't going to help as much, but yeah, I mean, he's got to block something. We do have a card in Arsenal. Oldhim is one of the few classes that has a decent amount of defense reactions in Tales of Aria. So there's a non-zero chance that he has a defense reaction. Could be in Arsenal, which would be the great, best time to play it against a dominated attack. So I guess we're going to see. Is he just going to take it?
It looks like he's just going to chin it, yeah.
That's a big smack to the chin, yeah. So, I mean, like, if you're sitting here and you're Paul, you're like, wait, is he
Yeah, and so we see that's a full attack getting chinned here by Caleb. He's down to 11.
Ooh,
and
this is a big
he does
one.
have a pitch to a card, and now we see kind of why he wanted to keep his cards. He's got 2 big pitches here into a Glacial Footsteps. This is a big card. This is not fused, so it doesn't have Dominate, but it's just a very, very large attack.
It is. It's coming in for. Is this the 2-cost version?
This
coming
is the 2-cost.
Come for 9, I believe. It's a big attack.
Yeah, these are some of the bigger attacks ever printed, basically on a card.
I mean, yeah, when you're getting up there. So he's blocking with a single strength of Sequoia. So Paul's going to be taking a good chunk of damage here.
I said to get comfortable. I think I may have misread this matchup. These guys look like they're trying to thump each other
it's
a
like
lot of these games.
Battle of Titans, just swinging these massive fists back and forth. And here we have. Ooh, is that a Channel Mount Heroic? So this card is sweet. Okay, so Channel Mount Heroic is a card that's going to pump up every single attack that Paul plays this turn. So that's going to get a +3. Is that a red pitch version? If it's a red pitch, it's coming in for 6 + 3, so that's 9. It will threaten a Frostbite token on hit, but either way, getting that +3 is very, very nice. I'm a big fan of Channel Mount Heroic. I really like it in go wide decks, but it's still great here, right? It's still a +3, which is not too bad at all. And it turned an otherwise kind of innocuous attack into a very threatening attack.
Yeah, we're seeing this is a big attack to begin with. It's got a really good on-hit here with the Frostbite token, but we've already seen 1 thump in a deck, and I'm telling you right now, if you see a thump in one of these decks, they have more.
Yeah, I mean,
they come in packs.
Yeah, thump's a good one to draft. And here we have a
triple block.
Massive block. Yeah, so we have a massive block here. The thing is with Channel Mount Heroic is it's going to stick around as long as there are Earth cards in Paul's pitch zone equal to the number of counters on it. It's kind of a complicated card here, but it will stick around for 1 more turn at least.
All right, so it does look like we're going to go ahead and use the equipment to give a Frostbite token here, something we saw some players get really aggressive with here today.
I think that's a really great play here because you want to tax Paul. He's got that Channel Mount Heroic, and you're like, I need to slow this down. I don't want him to come at me with more big attacks.
Exactly, and so this is an attack that's really good for it. Not only is there already a Frostbite token, but this attack is already threatening to get another one. So this is the same attack that we saw Paul from last turn that has it on hit, where if it does, another Frostbite token will be attacked here, and they do stack here in this game. So the first thing that comes up is going to cost 2 extra, and that could be way too much for some of the attacks that come out of Oldhim.
Yeah, so like basically either way, Paul either blocks with a lot of cards from his hand, loses a lot of cards from his hand, doesn't take, damage, but then he's out cards from his hand, or he can just block a little bit, take some damage, but like you said, it'll still create that Frostbite token, and it looks like it's gonna create that Frostbite token.
And so this is a spot that I always find myself in. It's very complicated. So Paul took all the damage and went down to 8. So it's kind of scary because you're like, oh, you want all of your cards, but it also could be part of the fact that Paul needs all those cards to have a functional turn through these Frostbite tokens. So you can see what we were kind of alluding to this all day. We didn't get to see much Frostbite today, but when we do, and you get to see it, stuff like this, it's very highly impactful when it starts to really gum up the hands of players. So it makes them make really strange decisions on their blocking, and their sequencing, and how they want to do anything. Here's the other thing, too. You have to pay this cost. It's not a, hey, I'll play my card. Oh, I won't pay this, and I'll pitch the card, and then those go away.
Yeah.
So you can't just play like a 0-cost card into this.
Yeah, so basically you have to overpay, right? So he's playing this Icy Path again, and he's going to have to overpay. It is going to get that pump again from the Channel Mount Heroic, which is very, very nice. So he's just following it up, right? He's like, second verse, same as the first, basically. And it's still a great place to be in. And for Caleb, you're like, you spent all that time getting him, adding all these Frostbite tokens, and he's just following it up. Blocking with 3 cards.
Yeah, another triple block here from Caleb. It's going to prevent the ice from happening. He's not going to get the Frostbite token. This is also big, too, though. It does get rid of the aura as well. So we're kind of back to parity just a little bit here. But Caleb has the better weapon here that might be relevant. He does have a card in his arsenal, and then we're going back over to Paul here in a minute. He's still got a plethora of equipment left over to use.
Yeah, he's got some nice equipment. He has a card in arsenal. So I think we could see a decent turn come out this turn. He still hasn't used his Coat of Frost. I mean, yeah, like you said, he's got a lot of equipment here. He has a lot of options. It's one thing I think is very interesting. If he is running Thumps, I think Cracker Jacks with Thump is really sweet.
And so that might be why you haven't really seen him use the Cracker Jacks just yet. He's waiting for that opportunity of, maybe I need to make sure, like let's say he has 2 or 3 Thumps in his deck. He knows he's been through 1 already. He knows he needs, hey, I need to wait. Oh, here we go. The aggressive Frostbite. I like it.
Got the Frostbite. And yeah, like you were saying, like the Cracker Jacks, I think it's better to save it and get more value out of it.
Well, speaking of, here we go. I'm saying, here it comes, Cracker Jack. I have been a prophet this game. That's all I'm saying. After this, I'm going to get a lottery ticket.
Got the Soul Read. Is this a blue Thump? Either way, Dominate, right? Which is very, very sweet. So it's going to get +1, which is going to give Thump Dominate. Once again, you pump the Thump to get that Dominate. It's coming in for a lot. Do we know what card Caleb has in his arsenal?
I don't think we do. I've seen him looking at it, but I don't think I've gotten a good look at it. It looks like Caleb is going to line up a block here.
Yeah,
try to soak up some of this damage.
Yeah, so unless the card in his arsenal is a defense reaction, this is about as much he can do unless he has a Earth card in his hand that he wants to use for Oldhim's ability. What I think is actually very, very interesting is we have not seen many Oldhim hero abilities activated almost at all today.
We saw one player get really aggressive with using it, and that's about it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think that's something we should, both us and viewers out there should just pay attention to going forward, how often they actually use these hero abilities. So we have a pretty good card coming in. Is this the yellow version? If it's the yellow version, it's coming in for a solid 4 with a pretty good on-hit effect. So it's a very threatening card. It's like you don't want him to hit with this because either way, you might lose a card from your hand. And so the on-hit effect on this one either forces your opponent to discard a card or pay 2 resources. So either way, they're going to be losing something.
I think Oldhim is my least favorite hero to play against because it does all of the funky stuff where you have to make all these decisions. Yeah, like this one, like this attack right here from Frostfang. It says they discard a card unless they pay 2 if it hits.
Yep.
And there's so many cards on it, like do this unless they do this, or do that unless this happens. And I always seem to make the wrong decisions every time in these spots.
It's really tough because that card, if it hits, will take a card from their hand no matter what, either from pitch or having to discard it. And he's going to block for 3 here, and then instead of discarding, it looks like he is going to pitch. Or maybe possibly use Oldhim's hero ability. He kind of did a little tap on Oldhim there.
Yeah, that actually prevents the 1 damage from being taken.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, might as well, right? If you're going to lose the card anyway.
Yeah, it looks like Caleb's going to draw back up. That card is staying in his arsenal. He's at 9.
Just going to hammer you.
Yeah, going to attack with a hammer, pitching
time.
a mulch here.
Yep.
A card that actually would have been really good to be able to attack with here if you could fuse it, because it is a lot like Command and Conquer for you
for
classic
sure.
constructed players out there. If it does hit, it takes away the person's arsenal.
Yeah, I think it's actually in a very good spot in this meta because a lot of people want to play cards in their arsenal. So it's kind of sad.
Yeah, you were talking about how like you were incentivized to play cards in Arsenal in this set
there's
so
so many
much.
great cards that are played from Arsenal. And so instead of actually being able to play it, he's going to have to just swing on in with his hammer, which is not nothing. It's not nothing.
Yeah, in my early days of playing this format, I was actually a big fan of Oldhim decks that had mulches in it because I was on the draw so often. I always wanted to be on the draw. And turn 1, most people wouldn't just empty their hand attacking you because, you get the free blocks and you get to, like, pitch your cards. So people I found were about 90% to Arsenal on turn 1, and then you're like, okay, thump you.
Yeah.
Let me get that Arsenal.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think most people want an Arsenal, right? Because you can get that extra card here.
Yeah.
And there's so many cards, like we said, just you get value from playing from the Arsenal. So Caleb's in the tank here, which tells me he's very, very, considering what he wants to do on his turn.
And I think it had to center around exactly this card that he's blocking with. That's a Glacial Footsteps. And I think he was wondering, am I attacking with this? Because if I'm not attacking with this turn, I probably should be blocking with it here, and that's what he ended up doing.
Let's see what he follows this up with then. Okay, so this is another setup card. This is a setup card. It's very similar to Strength of Sequoia. So it's going to pop on this next turn and pump an attack. But instead of creating Seismic Surge, it's creating a Frostbite token. And he's going to follow that up with a good old 4-attack Hammer Swing. And if this one hits, it'll also create a Frostbite token. So he's kind of like, saying, hey, ooh, we have a defense reaction here. So this defense reaction, he does have to pitch for it.
Yeah, he does have to pay the extra for it as well. The Frostbite's in there.
Yep. And so that does actually clear his Frostbite, which is very relevant.
That was actually huge for Paul here. He went from having 1 to possibly a second Frostbite to 0 going into his turn.
Yeah. That's very, very relevant. being able to get rid of those frostbites when it's not your turn, and you don't have like little zero cost go agains a lot. When you're playing Oldhim, you have these big heavy hitting swings. So getting rid of them before it's actually your turn is very, very nice. But we still have this card sitting on Caleb's side, threatening a good old. If it's a red pitch, it's a +3 here. So this could be another massive thump turn coming, and we've seen a lot of thumps coming out from Oldhim, and I would not be surprised if we see something similar.
Well, it looks like the thump's
Caleb's
actually
turn.
going to get pitched for resources here, and the hammer's coming in. So maybe no way to really get enough value out of the thump that he wants, and he makes make sure it stays in his deck just in case.
So we got a swinging in with the just casually swinging in with the hammer. So Caleb's just gonna sit here once again, debate whether or not what cards he really wants to block with and what he can pump with. And this is where you really want to determine, like, okay, do I want to follow this up with a card like Thump or possibly something else? Thump is a card that doesn't cost, it doesn't cost little resources. Let's just say that. It costs a decent amount of resources. So this is some heavy consideration here. And I don't fault Caleb for going into the tank for this. Even though it's just a hammer swing, it's still, relevant and it's still threatening, especially when you're at 8 life and you want to come back. So he is going to block for 3 here. Take a little bit of damage. And let's see how Caleb follows this up. So that ore is going to pop. It's going to give his next attack +3. So this is going to be a big turn. How big of a turn we see, it's really going to be determinant on what Caleb has in his hand. So we see a pitch, and let's see how he follows this up. All right, so this one is not an attack action. It is played from hand. He's still setting up for something. Okay, so this one's very interesting. So this one is actually very interesting. Is he indicating that it's getting pumped from that aura card?
I think he's mentioning the Ice Quake here.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So now Paul is on the opposite side, tanking, determining what he's gonna block with here. So this card that he's attacking with. All right, so we have a block of 3. We have another 2 blocks, so he's blocking for 5 total.
And it looks like he's going to pump up one of the blockers here, because this is really important, because this is already pumped for, I think, 2 from the Ice Quake, as well as giving it a second on-hit effect of Frostbite, so it'd have 2 separate Frostbite hits. So you want to make sure that you can block as much as you can, because otherwise your next turn is probably not going to have a lot going on.
I think that's exactly right. So it's still going to create a Frostbite, which, it could have been worse. And let's see if Paul's just going to pass. So he's just going to pass, draw up, get rid of that Frostbite, and pass back to Caleb. And, as Caleb, that's kind of what you want to see, right? You want to have kind of a free turn here.
Yeah, I think that's huge for him, right? Because, both players are at 7. You have an arsenal card, but you're the first person to get tempo, right? You're the first person to be, the one attacking. So you have you have all the initiative here. So I think that was a really good back and forth, even though it didn't look great, right? You put a lot of resources into having a big turn, it still sets you up really well for the next one. So it looks like we're finally getting that card out of the arsenal.
All right, so we have this card in arsenal. So it's going to allow him to draw a card, and then he gets to pick. So he's going to pick, it looks like Glacial Footsteps, and that's going to go on the bottom of his deck. He still gets to draw a card, and so this attack has go again, or this non-attack has go again. So he's still going to be able to follow this up with another action. So being able to draw a card is great here, especially if it's a high value card, either attack wise or pitch wise. And as Oldhim, you just want to come in with more big attacks, basically. And that's if I'm sitting there as Caleb, I just want to see the really, really big attacks, or cards that help me set up for really big attacks. We've seen some good setup cards already from Caleb.
And we're trying to see if there is one in Caleb's hand here, because this is a lot of resources here. It does okay. So
come in with a hammer. It's not a bad call, right? The hammer still comes in for 4.
It's a really big threat.
Yeah, it threatens a Frostbite on hit, and just 4 is pretty good. It's a great break point, both in Tales of Aria and even in other sets. We do have a block. Unless he blocks for more, he's going to end up taking some damage. Do we have an Oldhim activation? possibly an Oldhim activation with a defense reaction. I think that's exactly what happened.
It does look like Caleb's going to go ahead and arsenal up, draw some cards here. We're going to pass right back over to Paul. So let's see if we got a big turn here from Paul.
Yeah, so just for those out there, if you don't know, Paul activated Oldhim's special ability to prevent 2 damage, thusly not getting that Frostbite token. And so here we have another attack coming on in.
Looks like an evergreen.
Yeah, so was this one played from the Arsenal?
That I missed. I'm not sure if it was played from Arsenal, but I think it was.
If it's played from the Arsenal, it will go on the bottom of his deck. Right. So it's actually pretty good for late game. And in the Oldhim mirror,
that seems pretty important,
good.
Right?
Yeah. If it's played from Arsenal, I think it's pretty good here. So we'll see how this affects and see how Caleb ends up blocking it out. Because either way, if it's played from Arsenal, like I said, we'll go on the bottom. You still get some value out of this. And, I mean, we're both at 7. This is a fairly dangerous territory. We've seen some attacks, reaching up to 9, 10. And you don't want to get hit with like a 10 power thump that has dominate when you're sitting at like 7. That's a very dangerous place to be.
Does look like we're going to get a defensive reaction here from Caleb with the fusion. Is going to block out some of this damage.
So we do have very interesting. So we're going to pass back to Paul. Caleb is going to draw up, and we're going to see how Paul responds here.
Okay, it looks like we're going to have a judge call here, and we're going to come back to the booth here just for a second while they resolve this. And I'm going to get the information on what's going to happen here in just a second, so I'll let you guys... We'll let you guys at home know as soon as we know what's going on. But I want to go back for 2 seconds. That last play that we saw the evergreen from an Arsenal. I think stuff like that in the Oldhim mirror.
It was great.
Very important, right? Like making sure that you have enough gas as the game goes on. You're continually putting cards onto the bottom. We've seen the other cards that do those like effects be really big in these mirror matches, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of cards in Oldhim that kind of help you do that. You have your like So for Tomorrow, and you have like these cards that get you some value back and set you up for the late game. And we've seen the games be like blisteringly fast so far, and a lot of that's because of Briar. But Oldhim versus Oldhim, I think we want to we want to see some of that late game staying power, because I have definitely played against Oldhim decks, like even me playing Lexi, I played against Oldhim decks where basically you just run out of cards. I've been decked before in limited with...
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and they just like, I'm just going to block everything. So it's very relevant, and it's something that you definitely want to be cognizant of, especially if you're playing in like an Oldhim mirror.
All right, so this is going to take a few minutes to resolve, but I'm getting the information right now from the people that we've got running the tournament on what's going on. So Caleb accidentally drew an extra card there.
Ooh, okay.
Called it on himself right away, so props to Caleb. Anytime you make a mistake like this in a game, the best thing for you to do is, call it on yourself right away, get a judge 100%. Involved. This is what's called a hidden card error in this game. Now, this one's a little crazy in how we resolve it. It's got a lot of stuff that goes on to it. So the way this is resolved is the card goes into your hand. There's no way for the opponent to know exactly what card it is because the card has touched the other cards in your hand, and so there's no way to prove which one it is. So what's going to happen is the hand is going to be revealed to the opponent. The opponent is going to get to pick one of those cards, and it's going to go back into the deck. And I believe it's shuffled afterwards, like randomized afterwards as well. Now, there is another penalty that goes on top of this, and I want you to explain people at home what this one does. This is called an IP2 penalty. This is a... it's an intellect penalty 2.
Okay, so intellect is what your hero has that allows you to draw at the end of your turn, basically. Right. So most heroes in the game, with one exception, most heroes in the game have an intellect of 4. So at the end of your turn, you draw 4 cards, or up to 4 cards, I should say. And so if you have an intellect penalty 2, that's really rough, which means you'll draw up to 2 cards, half hand size. That is backbreaking, absolutely backbreaking in a game like Flesh and Blood, where cards are resources. It's a very, very rough.
Yeah, we're going to have to see how rough it's going to be, because we're going to go back into this game. Caleb, like we said, with the accidental draw of an extra card, you're going to see he's only got 2 cards in his hand there and a card in his arsenal. So this is it's going to happen for, I don't know how many turns. It's usually 3 to 5, right?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure on that, but either way, it's like enough to be brutal.
Well, here's a shrug from Caleb, and I got to admit, this is a pretty good shrug and a pretty good hand to have with this kind of intellect penalty, because this is a pitch into a big glacial footsteps.
I mean, it's a good follow-up, I'll be honest.
All right, so it's going to be a 2. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's going to be I'm getting more notes from the director. It's going to be a 2-turn penalty here.
Good to clarify that. Okay. Okay, so I mean, it's still 2-turn penalty. I mean, drawing 2 cards for 2 turn is still very, very rough.
Right.
Like, that's both from an offensive and defensive perspective, because you have less cards to block with, you have less cards to attack with, less cards to pitch for resources.
So this has probably never happened to you, but do you think there is a certain way that you should be approaching the matchup?
Oh.
Do you need to turtle up and kind of defend more?
I probably would. I mean,
That's
like,
your natural inclination,
it's either
right?
that or just kind of die because you're at 6, right? You can't really do much else. It's a really tough spot to be in, and like, good on him for calling it on himself. That's a very honorable thing to do, and it just it's unfortunate. It just happens sometimes, So we do have him. He's going to be drawn up. It looks like it's a drawn up to. He's drawn up to 3, so it looks like it was a -1 intellect for 2 turns.
Okay.
-1 for 2 turns. That makes sense.
Okay, that's actually a little bit easier on Caleb, I think.
It's still rough, though. I mean, I'll be honest. It's still rough. Anyone who's played Data Doll drawing 3 cards a turn knows how rough it is. It's pretty rough. And it still gives Paul a very, very, I don't want to say commanding lead, but it puts him in a very nice spot. To the point where he can only just I'm going to come in with the hammer. So he's coming in with the hammer, right? Great card. Attacking for 4, threatening that Frostbite. It's still like a tough place to be, basically. And so Paul here is now like, hey, my opponent's only got 3 cards a turn, at least for a couple turns. I really need to think how I can take advantage of it, because that's what I would be thinking, right?
Right, because you're already up a card. Like, you're actually up an actual card that they don't have in their hand and you do. So now at this point, like, you can start inserting your will a little bit as well, because you're a little easier to attack. You get to draw the extra card at the end of turn. There's another thump, by the way. I think it's the 3rd thump we've seen from Paul, if not the 4th.
So interesting that he's pitching the thump. So that could set up for a sweet late game. He is playing a card that is going to also let him get another card back. So once again, kind of setting up for a good late game. And I believe it was played from Arsenal, so it will draw him a card. And the card that he's picking, this Earthlore Surge, is a pretty sweet one to get back in game. Especially in combination.
It's a really good card with Thump as well. So I like the fact that that's going to be going to the bottom of his deck and the Thump's going to be right next to it. So you're almost guaranteed to have them in the same hand. That's some really good thought going if the game goes in the next couple turns to those cards. Some real good forethought from Paul, showing, maybe he's played this kind of matchup before.
And so we do have a Strength of Sequoia. We've seen this before. It's a good card to help set up for a future big turn. He's just going to play Strength of Sequoia, not going to fuse it, so he's not going to get that Seismic Surge, but he's just, like, I'm going to come in with this hammer here. So it will set up for a bigger turn later. I think one thing that's really important to note as well here is Paul's deck isn't looking very robust here. So
look a little thin.
All of those cards that he's tucking under are going to be very, very relevant. And so if you can sequence them in the right way, you can draw into something that's very, very spicy.
Whoa, this is a huge turn from Caleb. This is a Glacial Footsteps that's being attacked. It's also been fused, so this is dominated.
That's actually very, very scary. A dominated Glacial Footsteps.
This could not have come at a better time for Caleb either.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so not only, if Paul's able to survive this, he might lose so many resources that Strength of Sequoia is pointless, and I'm not even sure if he can survive this.
Right, because this is, which one is it? I think this is the 8. So he needs to block for 4.
So we have not enough block. So he's going to use Oldhim's hero ability. So it is going to be enough here. He's going to end up blocking for a total of 4. So he'll block for 2 and then prevent 2 using Oldhim's hero ability. So that's just enough to hold on, I believe. Yeah, but just enough. 1 health.
Yeah, this uses so many cards out of his hand, though, that this might set up a turn where Caleb doesn't really get attacked back for enough. And then, well, maybe I spoke too soon.
We do have an attack.
This is a pumped Evergreen.
So this might have been the Evergreen we even saw earlier. And so this is a pumped Evergreen. It's still a decent attack here, especially with Caleb at 2.
Yeah,
right?
Caleb's at 2. Paul is at 1. Another one of these super close games that you love and that you talk about, that we see these even more and more in this format.
And so Caleb at this point does have a full grip. I think he has a full 4-card hand now. So I mean,
we're past the intellect penalty.
Yeah, so he still has he's got a lot of options here now. He doesn't have that penalty, so I guess this is a great turn where he can kind of plan it out. His opponent's at 1, so you just need to push that little bit of extra damage through. It is also important to note we haven't seen this played yet this game, but Caleb does have that Rotten Old Buckler. So he could use that Rotten Old Buckler to help prevent some of the damage, maybe keep an extra card in his hand or so.
This does look like it's going to be a triple block here from Caleb. The thing I'm getting a little worried about for Caleb here is, he's at 2. He's not going to probably be presenting too much of attack here unless it's his weapon on the next turn. the bottom of Paul's deck is really, really good.
And Paul also still has that plume, that headpiece over there, which does let him get a card back from his discard pile. And so he just have a hammer attack.
Yeah, this is kind of what we thought was going to happen, the hammer attack coming across, and all of it needs to be stopped by Paul. So the on-hit effect doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. This is, like, if it deals 1 damage, Paul's dead. So as Paul, you kind of just want to see this, right? He's just coming in with the hammer.
All right, so there's that surge that we saw earlier get put to the bottom.
Yeah, so he's going to block for 2, and then he's going to use Oldhim's hero ability to prevent 2. This is actually a great strategy because it keeps cycling cards into his deck. Rather than losing cards from his hand, it's going to keep fueling that deck, and this is going to be a game where it's really going to matter.
Yeah, because Caleb's deck is getting really low, too, but we know that we're at the bottom of Paul's deck, and he set some of this up. So let's see if he can get together a good enough attack. It looks like he's going to be going for an attack here. There's a thump that's put across for some resources, and it looks like the hammer's coming across.
Yeah, pitch the thump, come in with the hammer. I mean, this is what it's going to be. It's just going to be 2 Oldhims throwing hammers at each other until one of them is no longer standing. And the decks are getting quite thin. So the longer you can last using like these hero abilities, cycling these cards, that's kind of where you want to be.
You know, this kind of reminds me of. This reminds me of like the WWF wrestling in the early 90s, late 80s, with the 2 huge muscle guys, like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, just standing in the ring, and they're just hitting each other as hard as they can, back and forth for 5 minutes.
That's exactly what this is. That's exactly what this is. And the number of wrestling references in Flesh and Blood, I think that's very, very apt. Very, very apt here. So we have a double block, which is great. You want to, if you're Paul, you want to see the double block, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You're like, he's getting cards out of his hand. Those are cards we're not going to see again. The more cards you can get rid of, the better. Ooh, this is a spicy one. This is
a snow under. So
this is a big one.
What is this, for 7?
It's a 7, I think. If it's a red one, it's coming in for 7.
And this is not where you want to be if you're Paul, because now he's going to have to be blocking with a bunch of cards from his hand.
I want to know, Paul has 0 cards in his deck right now.
I think Caleb, is Caleb going to do this?
It's very, very interesting. All right, so we have a block plus an Oldhim activation. So he's going to still be able to... Ooh, okay. So we do have card from Arsenal that will go back under the bottom of his deck.
Yeah, this is the Evergreen. This might be the same Evergreen that we saw, about 6 turns ago in this game.
It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So I think Paul's done a fantastic job cycling his deck. Like, between the Oldhim activation, between these Evergreens, he's done a great job. Like, this is something you really need to be aware of in Flesh and Blood, right? Because if he just blocked it all out, he would have no deck, and he wouldn't even be able to attack. And so Caleb here is like, I need to block something. Like, I'm at 1. I have to full block this.
He's still got cards from hand that he can block with. He's still got Oldhim's ability that he can use. He's got a Rotten Old Buckler as well that he can get in if he ever needs to do that extra little odd point.
I think one key thing is we have a lot of... Okay, so we do have the Oldhim activation here.
Okay.
So we have a double block plus the Oldhim activation to block all of it out. Which, I mean, you have to do it, right? I mean, you literally just have to do it, or it's game over. And you can see the deck size there. Pick up, like, the 1 card and
put it underneath.
Slide the other card underneath. This is...
Paul has no deck left. He's playing with what's in his hand.
Yeah, he's literally just, like, cycling those couple cards. He might even have 2 Evergreens.
Yeah, I think that's actually what's happening. He's got 2 Evergreens. He's just going to be cycling them.
So, I mean, okay, so this is very interesting, right? Do you want to just come in with a hammer, or... Well, first of all, let's talk about Caleb's turn here. Let's talk about Caleb's turn.
You might have to just make the biggest attack you could possibly have, right? Because this makes him have to do blocks.
So he's doing that. So he's pitching the Evergreen to Oldhim's hero ability, blocking it all out, and he's just gonna
draw the rest of his deck up to 3 cards. It looks like.
Yeah.
And here comes the hammer,
There's
and
the
that's
hammer.
gonna do it. And I cannot
Yep.
believe this game that we just watched. Wow, was that an amazing game between 2 Oldhim players? Caleb surviving an intellect penalty for multiple turns to be able to come back and win this game. That was one of the most exciting and best games that I've seen in a long time.
That was a far cry from the blitz, lightning fast Briar decks that we've seen. We went to fatigue here. This is the first time we went to fatigue, and Oldhim versus Oldhim, I am not surprised.
I gotta say, I'm impressed with the play on both sides. Paul, even in losing this game, was very impressive in the fact that, understanding where he was supposed to be in this matchup, understanding where it was going to go. I'm talking, 10 turns before it happened. You could see him already planning it, making sure Evergreen got to the bottom of his deck as quickly as possible and stayed there and really setting up for some of those big turns on the line. Just came up that one point
Oh, man.
short. So hopefully for Paul, he can recover his tournament here and do a little bit better. But Caleb's putting himself into a chance for a really nice run at this top 8. These players have 2 more rounds to go tonight, and we're beginning to get to that in just a few minutes. We'll be taking a little short break, probably about 5-6 minutes. We'll be back with a little bit more Flesh and Blood.